What I want to talk with you about is what I call the what got you here won't get you there dilemma. And I want to invite you to think about whether you've experienced this for yourself. It really has to do with inflection points in your career in which being successful was not about bigger, better, faster, but different. How many of you can think of moments like that that you've experienced? Just raise your hands. All right, we got some significant number, and it's not surprising because the digital shift that we're experiencing, the technologically driven changes, are really asking not just our companies to make a really significant shift, but actually ourselves, because if we don't, it's very hard to get our companies to make the changes needed. So let me explain a little bit about how I've been seeing this what got you here won't get you there inflection, because it has a few different parts. The first and most obvious one is that we are more victim of our strengths than we are of our weaknesses. So we've understood this a little bit better with our companies, and in fact, the extent to which our companies kind of get trapped by their successes, by their cash cows, by their most successful products, and kind of get caught unawares when there's a shift. The same thing happens to us. The problem with our strengths is that we overuse them. It's like a saying, give a small boy a hammer and everything is a nail. Our competencies are our hammers, and we overuse them. The second part, which is a little bit more subtle, is it used to be that you could wait until you had moved into a new job or a new company to have the what got you here won't get you there problem. You don't have that luxury anymore. In fact, what's challenging about it is that it is hard to tell when you're in one of those shifts. How many of you have been in the same title role for, say, more than 3 years? Same title, right? I've had my same title, full professor, since 1998. But I can tell you that the environment has changed and expectations of me have changed. And so they have of you. But the danger is when you don't have the neon sign of a new assignment, a new job, a new company, it's hard to tell when is the time. It's hard to have that urgency because the time for the shift could have been yesterday. You could still have a few months. You could have already missed the bus. We don't know. You yourself, part of making the transition is knowing that you are in it, and that's really critical. The third part is what's involved. And there's lots of research that shows that by and large, making these shifts has to do with moving from leading and influencing and persuading from a base of your specialty expertise, whether that's technology or finance or marketing, whatever it may be, to leading, influencing, and persuading on the basis of a combination of business acumen and soft skills, right? And what's interesting about that shift, it's not so much about competencies. It's a transformational shift because making it requires that you change in some fundamental way who you are, which is both the opportunity and the problem. Now, most of us know this. We've been told we're in a paradigm shift. We kind of get it, but we still have a hard time making this shift because we go about it the wrong way. And I want to talk about both the wrong way and the more helpful way to go through this. And I want to just start with an example to kind of put it in context. And this example comes from a CEO that I got to know well a few years back, who had been brought in from the outside to turn around a technology company. She came from an engineering background, and she was very successful in turning around this company. However, after a couple of years of doing so, she started to get into conflict on a pretty regular basis with her chairman and CEO, the founder of the company, a younger generation founder, who essentially, just to put it succinctly, found her not inspirational. Not inspirational, a little boring, a little cut and dried, too much driven by the numbers, too many numbers, not enough meaning. And this was really undermining her work as they set out to put in place the next stage of the transformation of the company. So as I was hearing her story about what was going on, I said to her, Anna, You know, it sounds like he's telling you that he'd like to see a little bit more about your point of view, your values, your human values, maybe a bit of a personal anecdote, a story, you know, just a different way of conveying the agenda than your usual spreadsheets. And this is what she said to me. Yeah, maybe, but for me, this is manipulation. I can do it, but if the string is too obvious, I can't make myself do it, right? This is BS. Now, the question here is this a leader being authentic, being true to herself? Or is this a leader being rigid and failing to adapt to a situation that's calling for not just a different skill set, but a different way of being? Now, the question in this, and I see hundreds of executives with different versions of this kind of dilemma. Maybe it has to do with collaborating more. Maybe it has to do with delegating more. Fundamentally, the reason why we don't do it is because it is not who we are. So the question is not how to teach Anna to learn in a classic way. And the classic way is you think, you figure out what the answer is, what you want, what kind of leader you want to be, what kind of organization you want to have, and then you act, you implement. It's theoretically perhaps right, but it's wrong. It's not how it happens. The question here for Anna and for all of you is what's going to motivate her to start taking some steps to do some new and different things that will change the way she thinks so that she values a different skill set and a different way of operating enough to try it, to practice it, to engage in it. And so the learning process is an act, then think, or act your way into a new way of thinking. It's more inductive, it's less linear, it's more experimental, it's closer to design thinking than actually implementing, and it's driven by what I call outside, getting outside, not introspecting, not reflecting, not planning, but trying new and different things and interacting with new and different people and letting that lead you to a new way of leading. So what I want to talk about is how do you increase your insight so you can equip yourself to make that shift, but more importantly, so that you want to make the shift, so that you find it motivating, enticing, exciting, and much better than staying stuck doing the same old, same old. 3 ways you can do this. One has to do with how do you redefine your job so that you focus on things that are more strategic, more value-added. How do you redefine your network, expand it? That's the flip side of your job, because what you do determines who you interact with, who you're exposed to, what ideas you get. And the third bit I call how do you be a little bit more playful with yourself so that you can go beyond the kind of rigidity we see someone like Anna expressing when she's first asked to do something that feels very, very unnatural. Okay? Take each of these in turn. I'm going to start first with having you think about your job and how you do your job, because it's really how we spend our time that shapes most who we are and who we think. Tell me if this looks familiar. Competency traps are when we're really good at something. When we're really good at something, we love it because it's so rewarding to do something you're good at. You're the go-to person. People ask you to do it. People value for it. They tap you on the head. They tap you on the back because you love it, because you're getting kudos. You do more of it. Because you do more of it, you get better at it. And as you get better and better, the opportunity cost of learning something new gets higher and higher. Who can recognize that? All the time. Again, we recognize it in our companies, right? Look at any story, any, Nokia with a smartphone. You can take any example you like. We get better and better at what we do really, really well, and it blinds us to the need to experiment with things that we don't do well, are not rewarding, don't come out right at the very outset. So we started to look at what keeps people. It's natural, it's human nature, and in fact, you have to do it to some extent because that's how we perform, that's how you add value. But how do you keep yourself from getting stuck in them? And the way you do that has to do with how you do your job. We started to see that any job you do, they're all different. You can do it either as what we called a hub. When you're a hub, you're at the center of the action. All roads lead to you, right? You are involved in every key thing that has to do with this function, this department, this company. You're at the center of it. You're the heartbeat. When you do it as a bridge, you're in the import-export business. Your most important role, what you and only you can do, is to have one foot in the group, the company, the department, and one foot outside, so you can make sure that you are the funnel of what's key information, key resources, key support, key people in and out of the group. Now, if you're working from a competency trap, which are you more likely to be doing? The hub or the bridge? The hub, the hub. The minute you start adding more bridge roles, more bridge elements, it's really hard to stay stuck in that competency trap, because you immediately see the importance of other competencies, how yours connects to others. You connect the dots. You start seeing new relevance. You start seeing pitfalls. You start seeing the gaps. And what you ultimately get is that mysterious quality that we call being visionary, which has nothing to do with you being born a charismatic leader or not, and everything to do with your capacity to see out and beyond, because you're actually out there. There's no way you can be visionary sitting in your office reflecting. You have to be out in the world. So the first thing to really keep in mind, if you are serious about transforming, is looking very hard about how you spend your day-to-day and whether it's giving you opportunities for looking out and beyond. A way to tackle that, the flip side of it, is your network. Because you can't see out and beyond if you have an insular, internally focused network, right? Impossible. The first thing we ask is, how broad is your network? Is it diverse? Because you know what? Your network is a reflection of who you are. If it's all like you, well, there's not going to be any diversity of thought. There's not going to be any fresh blood, any new ideas. And in fact, you will even be limiting as to what your possibilities are. You will pigeonhole yourself more than anybody else. The thing is, and I've been studying networks since my PhD dissertation in the 1980s, the thing is, human nature conspires against us when it comes to building broad networks. And I want to ask you, this is a little bit back to school, a quiz. Tell me what you think. There's been decades and decades of research in psychology on what makes people click in professional or personal relationships, right? What leads people to say, hey, let's get together again, let's have a coffee, or let's see each other after the conference, or let's go for lunch, right? And this is the lifeblood of our networks of relationships. This is what makes us actually not just exchange a business card, but be influenced by that relationship. So, is it intelligence? Attractiveness isn't just physical beauty, it's charisma, it's magnetism, anything like that. Is it attractiveness? Is it similarity? Is it frequent contact or power status? Let's just take a quick vote. Who says it's intelligence? Attractiveness. Similarity. It looks like a big wave. Frequent contact. Power status. All right. The crowd, the intelligence of the crowd has it. It is similarity. The number 2 is frequent contact. The way I translate these results from social psychology is that as human beings, we are narcissistic and lazy. Narcissistic and lazy. The wealth of research that shows that we favor, by far, in anything that's discretionary, people who are like us is huge. We say opposites attract, but it's not true. Similarity attracts. If you read way back Malcolm Gladwell's book, Blink, in the blink of an eye, we go from recognizing anything as trivial to, I like your shoes, to I like your tie, we seem to buy at the same place, to we grew up in the same place, to, you know what? We might be able to work together. I've got a project going on. Are you interested? In a blink of an eye. In a job interview situation, for example, studies show that if in the first couple of seconds you're able to establish common ground, know somebody in common, played the same sport, whatever it is, your foot's in the door, and it unfolds very, very differently. You get the benefit of the doubt. At INSEAD, where I teach, our business school is in France and in Singapore. We're extraordinarily proud of the fact that we are so diverse internationally. The school was founded by a number of different countries, and the idea was there would be no national majority in the MBA student body. So even today, in France, where I teach, the French are only 13% of the MBA student body. It's capped at 13. I don't know why it's 13, but that's where it's capped. And it's really crucial to who we are and our sense of our diversity of thought. But guess what? What do you think happens when you go to the cafeteria for lunch? The French are sitting together speaking French. The Chinese are sitting together speaking French. We don't have enough Swiss, but they'd probably sit together too, by language, by ethnicity, by nationality. In our discretionary relationships, we tend towards the similar, and that is a disaster for our capacity to be innovative and to think different. And it's not just that we're narcissistic, we're also lazy. We get to know and we get to like people who are easy to get to know and get to like because they work in the same office, they're on the same hallway, the kids go to the same school, you go to the same health club, you bump into each other, and by the third or fourth time you've discovered that you're kindred spirits or that you really have something in common. But both of these are really superficial sources of similarity. What we need to do is figure out how to get beyond, and it takes an unnatural act because this pressure for similarity comes from our very primitive days back in the savannah where we had to know very quickly, one of us or not one of us, friend or foe, is it going to eat me or will I eat it, right? We have to work at it. We have to work at it, and it's not in our nature. So what do we do here? We start to think about not just how do we reach out to a broader set of people, but how connective our network is, how well our network helps us reach out and beyond to younger people, for example, right? So it's not just on the basis of nationality. One of the things, we tend to mostly hang out with people our age. That creates huge blind spots. We tend to hang out at work mostly with people of our own gender. That also creates problems. There's lots of bases. And what happens is that over time, especially if we're time constrained, our networks start to look like the one over here, which is a tight, cozy circle, which is pleasant because it's cohesive and there's high trust. But guess what? You are vulnerable to change in the outside. When your network is like that, most of the usual suspects you turn to find out what's going on know each other. In network analysis terminology, that's called redundancy. And it's a great word because you are literally redundant. If we remove you, nothing really changes in the flow of information. The question is how to build a network that is more like the principle behind all social media, 6 degrees of separation. The fact that through the contacts that you have, you can reach out and beyond to different social worlds, beyond your company, beyond your industry, beyond your specialty, beyond your narrow, by definition, point of view. Now, that's an interesting proposition. I'll tell you just a couple of things about where the idea came from. The original studies on 6 degrees of separation, which, by the way, today is 4.3. Facebook says it's 4.3. The world's getting more connected, smaller. Came from a study in Harvard psychology department. They gave a bunch of people in Nebraska. In those days, the world for those academics was the US. This has since been replicated a bit more internationally. They gave a bunch of people in Nebraska a letter that had to get to a stockbroker that nobody knew in Boston. And you could only give the letter, mail the letter to somebody that you knew directly. And they had to mail it to somebody else. And what they found, hence 6 degrees of separation, is that it never got to the stockbroker in more than 6 links. However, most of the time, or a lot of the time, the letter didn't get to the stockbroker. In fact, it never got outside Nebraska. Because people's networks were homogeneous, they were dense, they were insular, they were inbred. Now, you laugh. I actually have a diagnostic on this. I give this to hundreds of executives every year. I've been doing this for 20 years. And guess what? If I were to survey your networks, they would also be insular, inbred, and redundant because we're narcissistic and lazy unless we really make this a priority. And so here I would say, make getting outside Nebraska a priority. It still happens, by the way, even with new technologies. There was a recent study in the MIT Sloan Management Review about use of Twitter and innovation and corporate innovation, and it turned out that corporate innovation was most affected by people who were not just social media users in this case, but people who were using Twitter, following people who were not also following each other, because we get dense and cozy and homogeneous even in our online networks. It's a human tendency that we have to work against. All right. The last bit I want to talk about is how do we be more playful with ourselves? Because if we're going to dramatically change how we define our jobs, what we're there to do, and we're going to dramatically change who we reach out to and with whom we build our networks of relationships, you know, that creates discomfort. Because it really, as much as we value the idea of being authentic, being ourselves, like Anna did in my opening example, in fact, doing what doesn't come naturally, what's unfamiliar, actually feels a bit inauthentic. At least it's inhabitual, and it feels a bit fake. It feels a bit contrived. When Anna first started playing around with, how do I be more inspirational? How do I speak? How do I walk? How do I relate? It really felt contrived and uncomfortable. But that's what it took, because the only way to do these things is not by reading, it's not by taking a class, it's not by talking, it is by doing. And so the last thing I'd like to advocate for here is how do we be more playful with ourselves? Rather than taking our identities as firm and rigid and heavy anchors, take them as possibilities, because we're not condemned to be how we always have been. We're not condemned to be our past selves. In fact, the wonderfulness of life is that there are future possibilities that we might not even anticipate. So let me close here. Putting it all together, I'm asking you to redefine your job, network more broadly, and be more playful with yourself so that we can transform our organizations and ourselves in so doing. Thank you very much.